Billionaire orders in Mandarin to mock a single dad waiter. His reply shocks her on the spot. He speaks 7 languages. She speaks the language of power. Neither one was prepared for what happened next. Marcus Webb had learned to be invisible. But on the night she tested him in Mandarin, everything changed. No one saw it coming, not even him. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who look right through you, this story is for you. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us, have you ever hidden a gift because the world didn't seem ready for it? Your story matters. Now let's begin. The crystal glasses at Belmont never touched. That was the first rule Marcus Webb had learned when he started working there 5 years ago. You carried them by the stem, set them down without a sound, and made sure they caught the light just right, so guests could admire their own reflections in the shine. The second rule was simpler. You did not exist. Not in any meaningful way. You were a function, a shadow with a name tag, a warm body in a black vest whose entire purpose was to anticipate needs before they were spoken and disappear the moment they were met. Marcus had mastered both rules completely. He was 37 years old, and he had spent the last 5 years perfecting invisibility. The restaurant occupied the 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower in downtown Chicago, where the city sprawled beneath floor-to-ceiling windows like a living painting, all electric light and motion, beautiful and indifferent. The clientele were the kind of people whose names appeared in newspapers not because anything bad had happened to them, but simply because they existed. Executives, heiresses, politicians who smiled too broadly, men and women who had never once in their adult lives checked a price before ordering. Marcus moved among them like water through stone, present, purposeful, and utterly overlooked. He had a system for the dinner rush. Table assignments memorized by the time he clocked in, allergies flagged in red on his mental list, wine preferences noted from prior visits. He anticipated, he adjusted. He delivered plates with the quiet precision of someone who understood that his competence was most appreciated when it was least visible. On a Thursday in late October, with autumn pressing its cold nose against the glass, Marcus was running table 7 when he first saw her. She came in alone. That was unusual enough to register. Women who dined alone at Belmont were rare. Most came with the gravitational pull of someone powerful orbiting them. She carried no such orbit. She walked in the way people walk when they have spent years training their body to communicate authority before a single word is spoken. Straight spine, measured pace. Eyes that moved across the room like a surveyor assessing land she intended to buy. She was young. Late 20s, Marcus guessed. Dark hair pulled back in a way that was elegant, but not fussy. A charcoal blazer that probably cost more than his monthly rent. No jewelry except small, understated earrings that caught the light like the crystal glasses. Quietly, deliberately. The host, Daniel, practically floated to her side. Marcus already knew her name before she was seated. You learned the regulars fast, and you learned new arrivals faster. The ones with the quiet confidence of someone who had never been kept waiting a day in their life. Her reservation was under Calloway. Diane Calloway. He knew the name from the financial section of the Tribune, from overheard conversations at the bar, from the way men in expensive suits sometimes mentioned her in lowered voices that couldn't decide between admiration and unease. She had taken over her father's company at 24, restructured it in 18 months, doubled its value in 3 years. She was 28 now and ran Calloway Enterprises like a chess grandmaster, 3 moves ahead, always. She was seated at the window table. The best one. Marcus adjusted his path. He reached her table 2 minutes after she sat. Not so fast it felt eager. Not so slow it felt neglectful. He set her water without being asked, offered the menu with a slight incline of his head, and waited. She didn't look at him. She was reading something on her phone, and she continued reading before setting it face down on the tablecloth and opening the menu. Marcus stood at the precise angle that indicated attentiveness without intrusion. He had spent years calibrating that angle. "The halibut," she said without looking up. Her voice was low and controlled, the kind trained to command rooms. "Is it fresh?" "Yes, Miss Calloway. Delivered this morning from Seattle. Chef Lambert sears it with a brown butter and caper reduction. It's been one of our most requested dishes this season. She turned a page. And the wine list? I can bring it, or I can make a suggestion. The 2019 Chablis Premier Cru pairs exceptionally well with the halibut. Mineral, clean finish. She looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black in the low light, and they held the specific quality of someone who had learned to assess people quickly and thoroughly. Not out of cruelty, but out of efficiency. Fine, she said, and returned to her phone. Marcus delivered the wine, took her order, and moved on. He checked in at the appropriate intervals, present without hovering. She ate methodically, checking her phone between courses, exchanging 2 brief calls she kept inaudible behind a cupped hand. He was refilling her water glass after the main course when it happened. She had set her phone down and was looking out at the city below. Something in her expression had shifted. The efficiency softened slightly, some private thought moving across her features like a cloud shadow. Then she turned and looked at him directly. And she spoke in Mandarin. 这道菜让我想起了北京. 你知道北京吗? It was casual, almost lazy. The way you might speak to a dog you expected to cock its head in confusion. A test, a small cruelty, delivered with the smoothness of habit. Marcus understood the type. He had encountered it before. The wealthy guest who tried a foreign phrase on the help to watch them scramble, to confirm their own superiority in a way that cost nothing. He looked at her, and he replied in flawless Mandarin. 我从未去过北京，但我读过很多关于它的书。您是指老北京的菜肴，四合院里的那种，还是现代融合风格? He had asked whether she meant the old Beijing cuisine, the kind served in courtyard houses, or the modern fusion style. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds. In a restaurant full of low conversation and the soft percussion of silverware against porcelain, 3 seconds was an eternity. Diane Calloway did not scramble. She did not recover with false composure the way some people did when caught off guard. She simply looked at him, really looked for the first time. And something behind her eyes recalibrated entirely. Old Beijing, she said in English now slowly. My grandmother's kitchen. Then you should try the duck here sometime, Marcus said professionally, already moving to collect her plates. Chef Lambert has a version that's closer to the original preparation than most places in this city. When he returned to bus her table 40 minutes later, she had left. The tip was 3 times the standard, and beneath it, a business card. On the back in clean, precise handwriting. What else do you speak? Marcus stood in the staff break room, his black vest unhooked, his feet aching from 8 hours on polished concrete, holding a card from one of the most powerful women in Chicago. He turned it over. Twice. He thought about Lily, asleep right now at Mrs. Henderson's apartment 2 floors below his own. 6 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, currently obsessed with a book about dolphins she'd checked out 3 times from the school library. He thought about tomorrow morning, the smell of toast, the cartoon voices from the living room, the small warm weight of her leaning against him on the couch before school. He set the card in his front pocket. He didn't call, but he didn't throw it away either. The next morning, Marcus woke at 6:15 to the sound of Lily singing to herself in the kitchen. She was standing on the step stool she needed to reach the counter, very seriously arranging bread in the toaster with both hands, wearing her purple pajamas with the white stars and a look of deep professional concentration. Good morning, Bug, Marcus said from the doorway. I'm making breakfast, she announced. Don't help. I wouldn't dream of it. She was 6 and brilliant and the best thing in his life by an incalculable distance. Dad, she said, if a dolphin learned another language, would it still sound like clicking? He poured himself coffee and considered this seriously. Probably, he said. Because the clicking isn't just the language, it's the voice. Like how I speak French, but I still sound like me. She absorbed this. Do you think dolphins know they're smart? I think they know they're happy, he said. And sometimes that's smarter. She thought about that all the way to school. Marcus walked her the 4 blocks to Lincoln Elementary, her hand in his, her backpack shaped like a turtle. The October air was sharp and clean. She talked the whole way, about dolphins, about her friend Cora's loose tooth, about the school play where she had the role of a tree, and was deeply committed to the performance. He kissed her forehead at the gate and watched her run to where Cora was waiting, and he felt the familiar compression in his chest. That specific mix of love and worry and something that was almost grief, though he never let it become grief in front of her. He had been raising Lily alone for 4 years. Her mother, Claire, had left when Lily was 2. No villain in that story, just 2 people who had grown in different directions until the distance became too wide. Claire was in Portland now, remarried, a kindergarten teacher. She sent cards on birthdays and a check at Christmas. Lily accepted this with the pragmatic grace of a child who had always known her world to be exactly as it was. Marcus had built their life carefully. The apartment on Halsted was small but bright. The school was good. Mrs. Henderson downstairs watched Lily on late evenings, charging him in casseroles rather than cash. He was proud of it. He was also, honestly, very tired. He thought about the business card as he rode the L home. 7 languages. He had never told anyone at Belmont, not out of shame, but because relevance creates expectations, and expectations rearrange lives. Spanish from a neighbor on the block where he grew up. French from a high school teacher who recognized something in him and fed it. Mandarin from library books and a community center class at 19. Arabic, Japanese, Russian, Portuguese. Each one learned in the margins of a life defined by necessity. Night shifts, community college classes paid for in installments, library cards in 3 different branches, hours stolen from sleep. That evening, before his shift, he dialed the number. Calloway. Ms. Calloway, this is Marcus Webb, from Belmont. You left your card. A brief pause. Something almost like a smile in her voice. Mr. Webb, I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. I almost didn't. What changed your mind? He looked out at the skyline. Curiosity, he said. What did you have in mind? A longer pause. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. Not warmer exactly, but more honest. I'm not entirely sure, she said. But I think we should find out. Marcus Webb stood in a break room smelling of coffee and dish soap, holding a phone to his ear, feeling the unmistakable sensation of something beginning. He had no idea how much it would cost him, or how completely it was about to change everything. Welcome back, friends. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. Stories like this one are why we do this. And if you've been here since the beginning, drop a heart in the comments. It means the world. Now let's continue. 3 days passed before Diane Calloway returned to Belmont. Marcus noticed her the moment she stepped through the door, the way you notice a change in weather before it arrives. Something in the air shifts, quiet and charged. She was wearing deep navy this time, a structured coat she handed to the attendant without looking at him. And she moved with the same measured authority that had marked her first visit. She was seated at a different table. Not the window table, that was occupied by investment bankers Marcus recognized from their quarterly appearances, 2 men who always ordered the same thing and tipped with algorithmic precision. Daniel placed her near the interior wall, at a 4-top she occupied alone, and Marcus registered the small flicker of displeasure that crossed her face before her composure erased it. He was at her table in 90 seconds. Good evening, Ms. Calloway. She looked up from her phone. And this time, briefly, genuinely, she smiled. It wasn't a large smile, not the kind that takes over a face and announces itself. It was the kind that happens before the person decides to let it, small and involuntary, like a door opening a crack before someone remembers to close it. Mr. Webb, she said, the window table will be free in approximately 20 minutes. If you'd prefer it. She considered. I'll stay here. Then, after a moment, you remembered. I pay attention, he said simply. He brought her the wine she'd had on her first visit, without being asked. She raised an eyebrow slightly when it arrived, then said nothing, only lifted the glass and turned it in the light the way someone does when they are making a decision about something other than wine. You called, she said. I did. And then you didn't follow up. I wasn't sure what following up looked like, he said. Professionally speaking. She turned the glass again. What about unprofessionally speaking? Marcus met her eyes with the careful honesty of a man who had learned to answer truthfully without overstepping. "I thought about it," he said. She set the glass down. Something in her expression settled, like a question being filed away for later. "Sit down," she said. He blinked. "I'm working, Miss Calloway." "I'm aware of that," she said. "I'm asking you to sit down for 2 minutes. I'll tip you appropriately for the interruption." It was the kind of request that could have landed badly, the billionaire commandeering a server's time as though it were just another available resource. But something in her delivery softened it. She wasn't buying him. She was asking him. There was a difference, and she seemed to understand that he knew it. He sat. "7 languages," she said. 7. Where does someone who works at a restaurant learn 7 languages? "Libraries," he said. "Community classes, obsession mostly." He paused. "Where does someone who runs a company learn to speak Mandarin well enough to test strangers with it?" She looked at him for a moment. The kind of look that evaluates before it decides to trust. "My mother was from Shanghai. She taught me when I was young." A beat. "She died when I was 16. Marcus said nothing. He had learned over years sitting at the edges of other people's lives that silence was sometimes the most honest response. He let it rest between them without rushing to fill it with reassurance or redirection. She seemed to notice that he hadn't said he was sorry, hadn't rushed to comfort, hadn't made it about himself. Something small and careful shifted in her expression. "Why a restaurant?" she asked. "Flexible hours," he said. "My daughter is 6. I needed a schedule that put her first." Something crossed Diane's face. A faint surprise, quickly managed. "You have a daughter?" "Lily. She's currently working on a persuasive essay about why our apartment needs a fish." Diane's eyes held a brightness that hadn't been there a moment before. "Is she succeeding?" "Alarmingly well," Marcus said. "She presented a 3-point argument last Tuesday. Introduction, body paragraph, conclusion. She's in 1st grade." Diane laughed. A short, unguarded sound that clearly surprised her as much as it surprised him. She pressed her lips together quickly as if recapturing something that had escaped before she'd decided to release it. "I should let you get back to work," she said. "Probably," he agreed. He stood and straightened his vest. "The branzino is exceptional tonight, if you're undecided." "I'll take your word for it." She reached for her menu. Then, without looking up, "Marcus." He paused. "Don't wait 3 days next time." He walked back toward the kitchen with a steadiness he didn't entirely feel. Aware of her presence at that interior table, the way you are aware of heat from a nearby fire. Not burning, but impossible to ignore. His colleague Devon caught him near the service station, eyebrows lifted to his hairline. "Was that Diane Calloway?" Devon asked in the reverent whisper of someone who had definitely Googled her net worth. "It was." "Did she just ask you to sit with her?" "For 2 minutes." Devon stared at him. "Man," he said after a pause. "What did you do?" Marcus picked up a tray and smiled to himself. "I paid attention," he said. That night, after his shift, Marcus called Mrs. Henderson to confirm she'd be available Thursday. He had the day off and found himself not wanting to waste it, without being certain yet what not wasting it meant. He stood at the window of the break room, looking out over the city lights. Chicago in late October had a particular quality, all edge and cold fire, the lake dark at the city's east end. The buildings lit from within like lanterns. He had loved this city his whole life with the complicated love of someone who knew it had never quite loved him back. He thought about Diane Calloway's laugh, the surprise of it, the way she'd pressed her lips together as if embarrassed by her own warmth, as if joy were a thing to be managed rather than allowed. He thought about what it meant to be seen, not assessed, not catalogued, actually seen, as a whole person, with weight and dimension and interior life. He had not felt that in a very long time. Then he put his coat on and went home to his daughter. Lily was asleep on Mrs. Henderson's couch, curled around a throw pillow, the dolphin book open on her chest. Marcus gathered her carefully, the practiced lift of a parent who has carried a sleeping child 1,000 times, the particular way you hold them so as not to wake them. the slight adjustment when they shift into you. She stirred just enough to murmur something that might have been his name. "Got you, Bug," he said quietly. "I've got you." He carried her upstairs and tucked her in. He stood in the doorway of her small room with its purple curtains and the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that they had put up together on a Saturday afternoon 3 years ago. Following the instructions from a library book she had been very insistent about referencing correctly. He stood there longer than he needed to. Something was shifting. He could feel it the way you feel a season change. Not in one moment, but in the accumulation of small moments until one day you step outside and realize the air is entirely different, and there is no going back to what it was before. Standing in Lily's doorway with the business card still in his pocket, and the memory of an unexpected laugh still warm in his chest, Marcus Webb felt something very close to afraid. Not of Diane Calloway or her money or the way she looked at him like a problem she was genuinely interested in solving. Afraid of wanting something. It had been a long time since he'd let himself do that. He had trained himself over years of careful living not to want too much, because wanting had costs that fell on people smaller than him. He looked at his daughter sleeping in the starlight. He turned off the hall light and stood in the dark for a moment, listening to her breathe. Then he went to bed, and he did not sleep for a long time. Friends, we are deep into something extraordinary, and I promise you, the best is still ahead. If this story is moving you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and drop a comment telling us what you think happens next. Now let's keep going. The following Thursday, Marcus found himself at the Chicago Public Library on State Street. He had not planned this. He had told himself he was going to fix the dripping faucet, organize the kitchen paperwork, call the school about the upcoming parent-teacher conference. He had done all of those things by 9:30 in the morning, with a thoroughness that surprised him, as if he were clearing a path without admitting what the destination was. By 10 o'clock, he was on the L heading downtown. The library was one of his oldest refugees. He had come here as a teenager with a specific hunger, not for entertainment, but for the sense that the world was larger than the south side of Chicago. Larger than the apartment he had shared with his grandmother after his parents divorced. Larger than the carefully bounded horizon of what was expected of a kid from his neighborhood. Languages had been the door. Each one he learned was another room in a house he was building for himself, one he could carry anywhere regardless of what zip code he was sleeping in. He found a chair near the third-floor window, surrounded by the quiet industry of other readers, and opened the Portuguese grammar book he'd been working through slowly, expanding vocabulary in business and finance. He was a waiter. He did not need business Portuguese, but his hands had known what to take from the shelf before his mind caught up with the reason. He had been reading about 40 minutes when his phone buzzed, an unfamiliar Chicago number. "Are you busy?" Diane Calloway said. He looked at the grammar book in his lap. "No," he said. "I have a problem that may be something you can help with. I'm sorry for the short notice, and I got your number from the restaurant. I hope that isn't inappropriate." "It depends on the problem," he said. A slight roughness had entered her voice, as if whatever composure she was maintaining was costing her more than usual. "I have a meeting at 2 o'clock with a delegation from Sao Paulo. My interpreter had a family emergency this morning. My backup is in New York. I've called 4 agencies and none of them can place someone with business Portuguese before noon." Marcus was quiet for 3 seconds. "I have business Portuguese," he said. Silence. Then, "You're not serious." "I've been working through a business vocabulary expansion for the last few months. My Portuguese is conversational plus. I'm not a certified interpreter, but if you tell me the subject matter in advance, I can prepare." "Marcus." Her voice went careful, precise, each word loaded before delivery. "This is a $12 million preliminary agreement. These are sophisticated business people. This is not a dinner order." "I know," he said. "I also know you called me because you had no one else. And I know you don't make decisions carelessly. So tell me the subject matter." A long pause. He could almost hear her weighing it. The risk on one side, the absence of alternatives on the other. And somewhere in between a question about him that she hadn't yet answered to her own satisfaction. "Green infrastructure," she said at last. "Sustainable urban development, Partnership terms for a joint venture in Midwest markets. Marcus opened the grammar book to a blank back page and picked up a pen. "Start talking," he said. She talked. For 45 minutes, sitting on the quiet third floor of the Chicago Public Library, Marcus listened to Diane Calloway outline the architecture of a $12 million deal with the focused precision of someone who had never once wasted another person's time. She was thorough and calibrated, adjusting her explanations to what she had already understood about his intelligence. She gave him everything he needed and nothing he didn't. When she finished, "Questions?" "3," he said. 2 were about terminology. 1 was about the São Paulo team's specific expectations regarding timeline and deliverables, a point he suspected might become contested. She answered all 3 cleanly. Then, "Can you do this?" "Yes," he said. "My car will pick you up. Send me your address." "I don't have a suit appropriate for a $12 million meeting," he said. A pause with a different texture, something almost like amusement pressing carefully against the professionalism. "Send me your address and your measurements," she said, "and your shoe size." "Diane." "Marcus, let me handle it." He sent the address. He spent 20 more minutes in the library reviewing his notes, going over vocabulary, and tried not to think too hard about what was happening, because thinking about it required acknowledging that his life had just pivoted on a single phone call, and he wasn't ready to stand still long enough for that to land. The car arrived at 12:15. A black Escalade, and the driver handed Marcus a garment bag with the practiced neutrality of someone who had done this sort of thing before, and had made peace with not asking questions. The suit inside was charcoal gray. It fit him exactly. He changed in the apartment, caught his reflection in the bathroom mirror, and stood there with the unfamiliar sensation of looking like someone other people were accustomed to taking seriously. He was still Marcus Webb, the calluses from years of carrying trays, the posture of a man who had spent his adult life making himself smaller than he was. But he looked, for the first time in a long time, like someone who could walk into a room without apologizing for being there. He arrived at Callaway Enterprises at 12:45. The lobby had the hushed authority of a place where very large decisions were made quietly, and Diane was waiting near the reception desk. She saw him and something moved across her face, a rapid assessment, a brief recalibration. Then the composed control returned. She was in a slate gray suit that matched his, which he was certain was intentional. "You look," she began. "Different," he said. "I was going to say appropriate," she said. "But yes." They rode the elevator in a silence that had weight, 2 people acutely aware of each other in a space with no distractions. "Marcus," she said as the elevator rose. "Yes. If anything goes wrong, flag it immediately. Don't try to recover quietly." "It won't go wrong," he said. She looked at him. "That's a confident thing to say." "I know," he said. "It's also true." The meeting lasted 2 hours and 19 minutes. Marcus stood to Diane's left throughout, translating with a fluency that surprised even himself, not word by word, but in the deeper way of someone who understood what was being meant and could carry it whole from one language into another, without losing the weight of it. He caught nuances. He flagged a subtle misalignment in the timeline expectations that could have become a costly misunderstanding. He adapted register and tone, reading the room the way he'd learned to read a restaurant, the shifting dynamics, the moments of hesitation, the tells of people negotiating something they cared about. When it was over, the lead delegate from São Paulo, a compact and serious man named Eduardo Ferreira, shook Marcus's hand deliberately. "You are not an interpreter by profession," Eduardo said in Portuguese. "No, sir." "What are you by profession?" Marcus glanced briefly at Diane across the room, her back to him, accepting congratulations from her team. Then he looked back at Eduardo. "I'm still figuring that out," he said honestly. Eduardo Ferreira smiled slowly, with real appreciation. "Aren't we all?" he said. Afterward, in the corridor outside the conference room, Diane stood slightly apart from the current of celebration moving around her team. When Marcus reached her, she was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not gratitude exactly, but something more complicated and more honest than gratitude. "You flagged the timeline discrepancy," she said. It was going to become a problem later. My previous interpreter missed it in the written materials. Twice. A pause. "You're not a waiter," she said quietly. Not an accusation. An observation being revised in real time. A category being fundamentally reconsidered. "I'm very much a waiter," he said. "I'm also someone who speaks 7 languages and has been invisible for most of his adult life. Those 2 things have been true at the same time for a long time." She looked at him for a long moment. In her eyes something passed through, the hairline fracture in a wall that had been maintained with great effort for a very long time. "Why?" she asked, one small word carrying enormous weight. Marcus thought about the South Side apartment, about Lily sleeping with a dolphin book on her chest, about building a careful life from limited materials and never quite permitting himself to reach for more. Because wanting more, he said quietly, always cost the people I loved. Diane Calloway held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she looked away, toward the floor-to-ceiling windows and the October city far below them. "I'll have Gerald drive you home," she said softly. "Thank you. Keep the suit." Then, without turning back, "I'd like you available, Marcus. For situations like today, I'd like to make it worth your time." He was almost at the elevator when her voice reached him one final time. "And Marcus." He turned. Her back was still to him. Her voice was very controlled, but beneath the control, unmistakably, something that had not been there before. A crack, a small and important opening. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me with the honest answer." The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped inside. The city fell away below him as he descended 40 floors, and somewhere across the river, his daughter was at Lincoln Elementary, learning to be a tree, and somewhere in the space between what his life had been and what it was, quietly, irreversibly becoming, Marcus Webb felt the particular vertigo of a man standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. He did not know yet what it was. But for the first time in a very long time, standing at that edge, he did not look away. 2 weeks passed. In those 2 weeks, Diane Calloway came to Belmont 4 times. She always sat at the window table, always ordered the Chablis Premier Cru, and always, at some point during the evening, found a reason to speak to Marcus for longer than a standard table interaction required. The other servers noticed. Devon had taken to giving Marcus a look every time she walked in, a look that contained entire paragraphs of unsaid commentary. Even Daniel, the host, had begun seating her with a particular smoothness that suggested he understood something was happening, even if he couldn't name it. Marcus noticed all of this and said nothing. He was good at saying nothing. What he was less good at lately was pretending that the visits were purely professional. On her 3rd visit in those 2 weeks, she had stayed until the kitchen closed. The dining room had emptied around her in stages, the way restaurants do at the end of a night. The ambient noise draining out, the lighting dimming, the pace slowing to something almost domestic. Marcus had been closing out his section when she called him over, and what followed was not a table interaction. It was a conversation. 40 minutes, at least, about language, about what it felt like to think in more than one of them. The way your personality shifted slightly depending on which one you were using. The way certain emotions had words in one language that simply had no equivalent in another. She had told him that the Mandarin word for crisis, Wei Ji, was made from 2 characters, danger and opportunity. She had said it the way people say things they've carried for a long time and rarely get to put down. He had told her that the Portuguese word saudade described a specific longing for something beloved that was absent, possibly lost forever, and that he had always thought English was impoverished for lacking it. She had looked at him when he said that. A long, quiet look. "What do you feel saudade for?" she asked. The honest answer was complicated. He felt it for a version of his own life that had never quite materialized, the one where his gifts had found a larger stage, where he had not spent his 30s invisible, where Lily had grown up watching her father be fully himself. He felt it for the idea of a partner, of someone to stand beside him in the small hours when Lily had a fever and the world felt fragile. He had not said any of that. He had said, "A lot of things. What about you?" and she had been quiet for a moment, and then said softly, "My mother's voice. I can't remember it anymore. I remember everything else about her, but not the sound of her voice." He had not tried to fix that. He had simply said, "That's a hard thing to lose." And she had nodded once and looked out at the city. On her fourth visit, she had brought work, a folder of documents that she spread across the table with the air of someone who needed to justify being somewhere for a second hour. But Marcus had noticed that she checked the documents exactly once and spent the rest of the time watching the room with an expression that was, for her, almost relaxed. After his shift that night, there was a message on his phone. "I have an event Saturday evening, a charity function at the Art Institute. My usual company canceled. Would you be willing to attend as my guest? It would be a professional engagement, but I wanted to ask you specifically." Marcus read it standing in the break room, coat half on. He read it 3 times. He typed back, "What time?" 7. "Gerald will pick you up at 6:30. He put his phone in his pocket and stood very still for a moment, in the way that people stand when they are making a decision they already know the answer to, but haven't yet said out loud. Then he texted Mrs. Henderson. Saturday arrived with the particular crispness of a late October evening in Chicago, the air cold and bright, the lake visible from the Uber he took to pick up a small bouquet of flowers for Mrs. Henderson, who had agreed to stay the night with Lily with the particular enthusiasm of someone who had been watching this story develop from below and had opinions about it. "You look handsome," Mrs. Henderson said when he stopped by at 6:15, in the suit that still fit exactly right. "Thank you, Eleanor." "She's going to be fine," Mrs. Henderson said, meaning Lily. Then, after a pause, "And so are you." He kissed Lily on the top of her head. She was already in her pajamas, cross-legged on Mrs. Henderson's rug with a puzzle spread in front of her, deeply unbothered. "Dad," she said without looking up. "Bug. If you go to a fancy party, do you have to talk in a fancy voice?" "No," he said. "You just talk like yourself." She considered this. "Good," she said, "because your voice is already good." He was quiet for a moment, holding that. Then, "I'll be back before you wake up." "I know," she said, and returned to her puzzle. Gerald was outside at 6:30 precisely. The Art Institute of Chicago rose against the darkening sky on Michigan Avenue, its stone lions flanking the entrance in the lamplight, and Diane was waiting at the top of the steps. She was in black, a long coat over something that caught the light, her hair down for the first time he had seen it. Not the pulled-back efficiency of her working self, but something softer, more deliberate. She saw him coming up the steps, and the expression on her face was one he recognized from the restaurant. That brief involuntary openness, quickly managed before the composure settled back in. "You came," she said. "You asked," he said. They went inside together. The event was exactly what Marcus had expected. 200 people in formal wear, the warm glow of gallery lighting over famous paintings, the murmur of money being arranged for charitable purposes. He had been to spaces like this before only as a server, moving through them at the edges. Tonight he was in the center of it, and the difference was vertiginous. He was also, he quickly discovered, exceptionally good at it. Languages had taught him something that no formal education could fully replicate. The ability to read a room, to understand register and context and the specific social frequencies that different groups of people broadcast. He moved through the evening with Diane at his side, reading each interaction before it landed, adjusting, responding in the right key. He spoke briefly with a Japanese diplomat in his own language and watched the man's entire body language shift into warmth and ease. He caught a quietly condescending comment from one of Diane's board members, directed at him in French, clearly not expecting comprehension, and responded in flawless Parisian French with a calm that left the man visibly recalibrating. Diane had heard that exchange. She said nothing about it until they were standing at the edge of the room near a Hopper painting, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "That was Raymond Holt," she said. "He's been on my board for 11 years. "He was rude," Marcus said simply. "He's always rude," she said. "No one ever calls him on it." "Someone should." She looked at the painting. You didn't call him on it, she said. You just made sure he understood that you understood. There's a difference. Yes, Marcus said. That's a more elegant response. I learned from someone who uses silence the same way, he said. She turned to look at him, and this time, the composure didn't fully return after the moment passed. Something stayed open in her expression, something she was, for once, not trying to close. Marcus, she said, quietly enough that only he could hear it. I need to tell you something. He waited. I came to Belmont the first night because I always go there after a difficult board meeting. I go alone because I can't afford to let people see me rattled. A pause. I spoke to you in Mandarin because I wanted to feel superior to something. I was having a bad week and I wanted an easy victory. Another pause, and something behind her eyes that looked like the specific discomfort of honest self-assessment. I want you to know that I know that and that I'm sorry for it. Marcus looked at her for a moment. I know, he said. I knew it at the time. And you answered anyway. You handed me an opening, he said. It would have been a waste not to use it. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, but its first cousin. I don't know what this is, she said, meaning the two of them, meaning the evening, meaning all of it. I'm not a person who is comfortable with uncertainty. I know that too, he said. Does it bother you? Marcus looked at the Hopper painting, a woman alone in a room, lit from within, the darkness pressing at the windows. He had always loved Hopper for exactly this reason. The people in his paintings were never quite lonely and never quite connected. They existed in the in-between, illuminated and unresolved. No, he said. I've been living in uncertainty my whole life. It's familiar territory. She was quiet for a moment. Then, very softly, show me how. He turned to look at her. She was already looking at him, and in her eyes was something he recognized from the most important moments of his life. The look of someone standing at the edge of something vast and choosing, despite everything, not to step back. He raised his champagne glass slightly. One conversation at a time, he said. She raised hers to meet it. Friends, I need you to hold on tight, because the story we've been building toward is about to crack wide open. Everything Marcus and Diane have been quietly building, the trust, the understanding, the fragile and beautiful thing taking shape between them, is about to face something neither of them saw coming. Before we get there, drop a like if this story has touched your heart. Now, let's go. November arrived and the city hardened into winter. The trees along Michigan Avenue dropped their last leaves in a single overnight wind, and Chicago became its truest self. All steel and granite, and the particular stubborn beauty of a city that has never pretended the cold isn't coming. Marcus had lived here his whole life and still found something bracing and clarifying about it. Winter in Chicago didn't allow you to be vague. You either prepared or you suffered. He had been preparing in the weeks since the Art Institute evening for something he couldn't entirely name. Diane had not come to Belmont since that night. Instead, she had called. 3 times in the first week. Twice in the second, and in those calls something had shifted from what it had been at the restaurant. Less performance on both sides, more conversation in the truest sense. She told him about the company, about the board member Raymond Holt who had apparently apologized to her the Monday after the Art Institute, which she found suspicious. She told him about her father, who was alive but distant, a man who had handed her an empire and then retreated from it, and from her, as though the act of giving it had cost him something he couldn't recover. Marcus told her about the South Side, about his grandmother's kitchen, which had smelled of cornbread and something floral he could never identify, about the teacher, Mr. Bernard, 11th grade, who had handed him a French grammar book one afternoon and said, with the economy of a person who had learned that the important things needed to be said simply, "You're wasting yourself. Marcus, don't do that." He had never told anyone about Mr. Bernard. He wasn't sure why he told Diane. Maybe because she had told him about her mother's voice. On a Thursday in early November, a different kind of call came. It was from a number he didn't recognize. A 312 area code, Chicago. He answered it at the kitchen table while Lily was doing homework across from him. very seriously sounding out words in a book about weather patterns that she had chosen herself from the school library. "Is this Marcus Webb?" The voice was a man's. Professional. Careful. "It is. Mr. Webb, my name is Thomas Reardon. I'm a partner at Garland Reardon and Associates. We're an international consulting firm based in Chicago. We specialize in cross-cultural business facilitation." A pause. "I'll be direct with you, Mr. Webb. Your name was passed to us by a contact at Callaway Enterprises. We've made some inquiries and we'd like to meet with you." Marcus was very still. Across the table, Lily had looked up from her book and was watching him with the alert attention of a child who knows something important is happening, even when the adults are trying not to show it. "What kind of meeting?" Marcus said. "A preliminary conversation about a potential role," Reardon said. "You have an unusual profile, Mr. Webb. We work with clients doing business across multiple language markets. The ability you demonstrated at the Callaway Ferreira meeting has attracted some attention." After he hung up, Lily said, "Was that about a new job?" He looked at his daughter, 6 years old, sounding out words about weather patterns, watching him with her mother's eyes and his own stubborn precision. "Maybe," he said. "Would you still be home in the mornings?" "I don't know yet, Bug." She considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. "I think you should do it," she said. "You're too smart to carry plates forever." He stared at her. "Mrs. Henderson says so too," Lily added, with the air of someone presenting corroborating evidence. He called Diane that evening. "You referred me to Garland Reardon," he said. A pause. "Yes. You could have told me." "I could have," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to arrange things for you. You're not—" She paused, choosing carefully. "You're not someone who likes to have things arranged." "No," he said, "but I also trust that you know the difference between arranging and opening a door." A longer pause. "Do you trust that?" she asked. "I'm starting to," he said. He heard something on the other end, a breath, carefully released. Then, "The meeting is only preliminary. You don't owe me anything for it. I want to be clear about that." "I know," he said. "Diane?" "Yes. Thank you." 3 days later, Marcus Webb sat across from Thomas Reardon in a conference room on the 38th floor of a building on Wacker Drive. In the charcoal suit, and talked about himself honestly for the first time in his professional life. He talked about the languages, about how he had learned them and why, about the Callaway Ferreira meeting, about what he understood about human communication that went beyond vocabulary and grammar, the way trust was built across cultural gaps, the way misunderstanding happened not from language but from assumption. Reardon listened without interrupting. At the end, he said, "We have a position. It's not traditional. It would require travel, not excessive, but some. It would require discretion, and it would pay." He named a number. Marcus kept his face composed. The number was 3 times his annual income at Belmont. He drove home in a state of careful calm, the kind of calm that is mostly the effort of not getting ahead of yourself. He picked up Lily from Mrs. Henderson's, made dinner, helped with the dolphin chapter of the reading log, and when Lily was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the apartment and allowed himself, carefully and very briefly, to feel the size of what might be happening. He called Diane. "How did it go?" she asked. "Well," he said. "Are you going to take it?" He looked around the small, bright apartment on Halsted, the purple curtain visible at the end of the hall, the stack of library books on the counter, the step stool still positioned by the toaster. "I'm thinking about it," he said. "What would help you decide?" "I'm not sure yet," he said honestly. And then, "Can I see you? Not at the restaurant, not a professional context, just, can I see you?" The silence that followed was the kind that has a quality to it, not empty, but full of something being held very carefully. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Marcus, you can." He exhaled slowly. "Saturday?" he said. "Saturday," she agreed. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that, in the warm quiet of the apartment, with the feeling of something enormous and terrifying and necessary moving toward him like weather. The kind of weather that clears everything it passes through and leaves the air completely changed. He had been careful for so long. Maybe, he thought, maybe it was time to stop being quite so careful. It was that same night, after midnight while Marcus was finally asleep, that his phone lit up on the nightstand. A number he didn't recognize. A voicemail left in the small hours when the city had gone quiet. He wouldn't hear it until morning, and when he did, everything would change. Friends, we have arrived. This is the chapter I have been building toward since the very first word of this story. The revelation coming in the next few minutes will reframe everything you have seen, and leave you, I hope, with something you'll carry with you long after it's over. If you've made it this far, you already know this story deserved your time. Now let's finish it together. Marcus heard the voicemail at 6:47 in the morning, standing in the kitchen while Lily's toast was in the toaster and the coffee was brewing, and the ordinary machinery of their morning was running exactly as it always did. The voice on the message was a man's. Older. Measured, but with a roughness in it that suggested emotion being very carefully controlled. Mr. Webb. My name is Gerald Holt. I'm Raymond Holt's father. I know you don't know me. I got your number through some effort and I apologize for the intrusion. I'm calling because, a pause, something shifting in the voice, because I was at the Art Institute last Saturday. I saw you there with Diane Calloway, and I saw what you did with my son, and I need to speak with you. Not about Raymond, about something else entirely, something that concerns you directly. Another pause. Please call me back. This is not a threat. It is, I believe, important information that you deserve to have. I'm 81 years old and I've been carrying this for a long time. It is past time. Marcus played the message twice. Lily was watching him from the table. Dad, she said, your toast is going to burn. He crossed to the toaster. He moved through the rest of the morning with the practiced steadiness of a man who had learned to hold difficult things quietly until Lily was safely at school. And then he sat on a bench outside Lincoln Elementary for 10 minutes in the November cold and called the number back. Gerald Holt answered on the second ring. Mr. Webb, he said, thank you for calling. What do you need to tell me? Marcus said. The old man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 38 years ago, I worked at a language institute on the north side of Chicago. We offered community classes, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian. I was the director. A pause. One of our students was a woman named Carolyn Webb. She was 22. Extraordinarily gifted. She could acquire a language in months. Real fluency, not just conversational. I had never seen anything like it. Marcus's hands had gone very still. Carolyn Webb, he said quietly. That was my mother. I know, Gerald Holt said. I know, Marcus, your mother was... She was remarkable. She didn't have the background or the resources to pursue it formally, but I tried to help her. Scholarships, contacts, opportunities. He paused. And then she became pregnant, and she disappeared from the program, and I lost track of her, the way you lose track of people when life moves quickly and you're not paying careful enough attention. Marcus was standing very still on the cold sidewalk. What are you telling me? He said. I'm telling you, Gerald Holt said carefully, that the gift you have, the one you've been carrying alone your whole life, that you've been serving dinners with when you should have been working on something that matched it, that gift didn't come from nowhere. Your mother had it first, and she never got the chance to use it the way she deserved. And I have spent 38 years wondering if she had a child, and what became of that child, and whether that child was... His voice broke slightly. He controlled it. Whether that child was doing something worthy of the inheritance. Marcus sat down on the bench. He was not aware of deciding to sit. His legs simply made the decision. Why are you telling me this now? He said. Because I saw you at that gallery, Gerald Holt said. I heard you with my son Raymond in French. I watched you move through that room. And I recognized something, the same quality your mother had. The way you inhabit a language rather than just speaking it. It is not a common thing, Marcus. It is a rare and specific inheritance. A long pause. And because I am 81 years old and running out of time to say the things I should have said decades ago, your mother deserved more than she got. I could not give it to her, but perhaps I can give something to you. There was a long silence. She died 8 years ago, Marcus said. My mother. I know. I found that out when I started looking. I'm sorry. Marcus sat on the bench in the November cold outside his daughter's school, holding the phone, feeling something enormous and wordless moving through him. Not grief exactly, not joy, but something between them that didn't have a name in English. He thought about saudade. He thought about the way certain emotions required certain languages. She never told me, he said at last. About the Institute. About any of it. She may have found it painful, Gerald Holt said gently. A door she had to close. She used to say that languages were free, Marcus said. She said that was the point. You could own a language completely, and no one could take it from you no matter what else they took. Gerald Holt was quiet for a moment. She was right, he said. Then, Marcus, there's something else. Marcus waited. I have resources. I have contacts. I've spent 60 years building an international language and cultural consulting. I never had children of my own. Raymond. He stopped. Raymond is not the continuation I hoped for. A pause. I would like to offer my support, not charity, not pity. A recognition of a debt. To your mother, and to whatever she passed to you, that I have long owed and never paid. Marcus looked up at the gray November sky above Chicago. He thought about his mother in a community center class on the north side. 22 years old. Learning languages with a hunger he now understood was the same hunger he had carried his whole life, without knowing where it came from. He thought about the doors she had closed. He thought about the ones she had quietly, carefully left open for him instead. He thought about Lily. Inside the school building right now, learning to be a tree with total commitment. I'll meet with you, Marcus said. No promises beyond that. No promises beyond that, Gerald Holt agreed. That's all I'm asking. He called Diane from the parking lot of a coffee shop on Halsted 20 minutes later. He told her everything. He heard her breathing on the other end, steady and attentive, not interrupting, not reaching for a solution. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, How do you feel? He considered the question honestly. He was standing in a parking lot in November, in the city he had lived in his whole life, holding a phone. He was 37 years old. He had a daughter who constructed 3-point arguments about fish, and took the role of a tree with complete seriousness. He had spent the best years of his professional life invisible, and this morning he had found out that his invisibility was not the whole of his story, that somewhere behind him, stretching back before his own birth, was a woman who had loved words the way he loved them, who had been stopped before she could go as far as the gift deserved, and who had passed it to him like a letter she never got to finish. Like something that was always mine just got a name, he said. Diane didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, Marcus. Yes. The job at Garland Reardon. Take it. I haven't decided. Take it, she said again. Her voice was quiet and certain, the voice she used when she had already thought all the way to the end of something. Not because I'm telling you to, because you've been ready for a long time. Because your mother was ready and didn't get to go. Because Lily deserves to watch her father take up the space he was always meant to take up. A pause. And because I would very much like to see what you become when you stop making yourself smaller than you are. He stood in the parking lot for a long time after that. The November wind moved through the street, carrying the particular smell of Chicago in the cold. Exhaust and lake water and something indefinable that he had known his whole life without ever putting a word to it. He thought about his mother at 22. He thought about Mr. Bernard handing him a grammar book. He thought about a business card with a question written on the back. He called Thomas Reardon. I'll take the position, he said. On a Saturday in late November, Marcus Webb met Diane Calloway at a small restaurant on the north side. Not Belmont, not a window table, not a professional context of any kind. Just a booth near the back and two people facing each other without the architecture of their usual arrangement between them. He had told her, the week before, about Gerald Holt's full offer, the contacts, the introduction to a network that would have taken Marcus decades to build alone, the acknowledgement of a debt that had been owed since before Marcus was born. He had told her he was going to meet with the old man, that he wasn't sure what he was ready to accept and what he wasn't, that he was moving carefully. She had said, "You've been moving carefully your whole life. Maybe carefully and forward at the same time is enough." At the restaurant, they talked for 3 hours. About everything and nothing. About Lily's fish essay, which had succeeded and resulted in a small blue betta fish named Professor, who lived on the kitchen counter and was taken extremely seriously. About Diane's father, who had called her unexpectedly the week before, and with whom she had had the first real conversation in years. About what it meant to build something, a life, a relationship, a version of yourself, from materials that weren't always what you would have chosen. Toward the end of the evening, Lily called his cell phone. It was 9 o'clock and she was at Mrs. Henderson's and she had one important thing to say. "Dad," she said. "Professor ate today. Mrs. Henderson saw it." "That's great, Bug." "He's doing really well," she said. "He's adjusting." "Good," Marcus said. "So am I." A pause. "Is she nice?" Lily asked. Marcus glanced across the booth at Diane, who was looking at him with an expression that was warm and unguarded and entirely herself. The composure set aside. The wall down. Just a person looking at another person in the honest light of a small restaurant on the north side of Chicago. "Yeah," he said. "She's really nice." "Good," Lily said. "Okay. Good night, Dad." "Good night, Bug." He set the phone down. Diane was watching him. "Professor?" she said. "Her fish, named after a television character she respects." Diane smiled. Not the small, involuntary smile he had first seen at Belmont, but a full one, unhurried, nothing pressed back. "She sounds remarkable," Diane said. "She is," Marcus said. "She's the best person I know. And she told me the morning all of this started to change, that my voice was already good." He paused. 6 years old. Diane reached across the table and set her hand over his. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Outside the restaurant, Chicago pressed its cold nose against the glass, vast and electric and indifferent in the way that great cities are always indifferent. Not cruel. Just large, full of a million lives happening simultaneously, each one invisible to all the others. Inside, in a booth near the back, a man who had spent years perfecting invisibility sat across from a woman who had spent years building walls. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them was hiding. The languages Marcus Webb spoke, all 7 of them, shared one thing in common. In every single one, there was a word for home. He had spoken them all his life, without ever quite arriving there. Until now.